Today is Tuesday the 2nd of January 2014 and I'm here with the original dirtbag Logan Runnin, and we're having a conversation about CatFishGlass and his claims that there's something strange going on with the moon. Here is a video that Logan Runnin has just uploaded called "This Is It Folks, CatFishGlass Explains How We're All Gonna Die," and we're looking at a diagram that CatFishGlass has posted, and we're going to discuss this diagram and see what's going on in this diagram and see if we can't try and make sense of what CatFishGlass is trying to explain and his understanding of field rotation and what is going on with the moon. So let's go to the diagram that CatFishGlass has posted. This is a better view of it. Now in this diagram we see CFG Nimrod represents CatFishGlass standing on the Earth. That's why it says CFG, CatFishGlass. Nimrod standing on the Earth looking at the moon, and as he's standing here looking at the moon and the sun is shining on the moon, it's at first quarter, which means it looks like half a moon. This is what we see out on the right hand side. This is what CatFishGlass would see. But as the Earth rotates on its axis and the moon crosses the sky, when CatFishGlass gets down to this point as the Earth is rotated 90 degrees, then this is what he sees. Now, it seems a little bit confusing because we actually have to tilt our head to sort of understand what CatFishGlass is seeing in this box. But if you look at his view here, you see that he's actually looking this way now. Okay, if you imagine that his feet are on the ground this way and he's looking at the moon this way, then if we stood him up upright and looked at what he is seeing, then this is what he would see. The moon would look like this, whereas before it looked like this. Now there's only one problem with this diagram, and it's a simple mistake, and that is of course that the imagery for the Earth is actually incorrect, because as we look at this and look at how the Earth is rotating, it looks like the Earth is actually rotating through the equator. We should be seeing the North Pole here, not the equator, of course, because its axis of rotation is here. That's the only thing that's wrong with this diagram, but as far as explaining how field rotation works, the diagram is actually correct. All it needs is that the imagery for the Earth should show the North Pole or the South Pole here to show the rotation of the Earth. Okay, so I've got Logan. Logan's going to come in here. What do you think of this, Logan? Do you follow this diagram?
I'll tell you, it's really hard for me to follow it, even watching you explain it. From our perspective, you know, here on the ground, you know, the moon looks to me like, you know, it's the same. It's all, you know, it's always, you know, lit on the same side as it, you know, moves through. I haven't noticed anything different. But this guy is so persistent about this. We had to take a closer look at it, you know. But I understand what you're saying. Other than the perspective of where the sun is at, are we supposed to be looking from the top down of the Earth here?
Well, imagine him at the equator, okay, and the Earth is actually turned 90 degrees. So that would be 6 hours of rotation. 6 fours are 24. So 1 quarter of rotation would be 6 hours. So 6 hours later, you know, if he starts off here, then 6 hours later he's going to be down here. So he's actually going to be at this point here. So his viewing point of the moon is going to be 90 degrees to what it was at when he was up here, which is exactly what we see here. Now remember, if he's got his camera and he's taking a snapshot, you know, when you view the snapshot, you're not going to view it that way. You're going to view it as we see it here, as if our feet are flat on the ground. It's difficult to explain, but of course, you know, if we're looking at our photos this way, then it's going to show an apparent rotation of the moon. I'll just go back to the video that I did way back in August of 2012, trying to explain field rotation to Catfish. He seems to be confused between two things. He's confused between field rotation and the phases of the moon that it goes through every approximately 28 days. It's about 29.5 days. It goes from new moon through first quarter to full moon to last quarter and then back to new moon. And some of the comments that he's been making seems to indicate that he believes that the moon is, as he said here, was the quote, the moon is waxing and waning every 12 hours. Well, it's not waxing and waning because that's actually impossible. What he's suggesting is that it's going through a full month's phases of the moon every 12 hours or twice
Yeah,
a
because
day.
that means the percentage
Mm.
of that's blackened out or whatever on one side or to the other. I know what you're talking about.
Right. So
And it takes a long time to do it.
that's
30 days, right?
that's correct, and it can't possibly happen in 12 hours or twice a day. It's impossible. But what he's seeing, and he challenged me, and I went out with my camera and filmed the moon over 7 hours last year, and this is what we saw, and this is exactly what I expected that we would see. We started off with the moon looking like this, and you can see the angle of this shadow. The shadow is called the terminator, and we can see the angle here. And I went out every half an hour and filmed the moon, and this is what we saw. I'll just play this video here. So this was at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 4:30, 5 o'clock, 5:30. You can see it's vertical there. 6 o'clock we can see it's tilting the other way now. Now this is due to field rotation, and this is simply due to the moon traveling across our sky, or apparently traveling across our sky, as the
Okay,
Earth,
so
as the
let
Earth
me ask you
rotates
this.
underneath.
This is what he's seeing, and he's interpreting this as the Earth is flipping over. Is that what the whole deal is?
He seems to be saying that the moon is flipping over, but I'm getting confused messages from him, because, as I pointed out before, on one hand he's saying that the moon is waxing and waning every 12 hours, twice a day, he says. Well, clearly it isn't, and it's impossible, and I've actually challenged him to take photographs or video of the moon to show it waxing and waning every 12 hours, and of course he can't, and he won't. But he
Well,
was
two of those comments that I had, he had said that it wasn't seeing the moon move, but only an indication that the Earth was actually the one that was doing the flipping around, and that would be connected to the weather and things like that.
There's another diagram which is actually quite helpful in explaining field rotation. This is on an astronomy site. There are two types of telescopes for following objects in the night sky. There are telescopes that are equatorial, which will actually compensate for field rotation, and there are telescopes on what's called an alt-azimuth mount, which does not compensate for field rotation. And these diagrams here actually demonstrate what's actually going on, and we can see the constellation Cassiopeia here rotating through the sky, and further down here there's actually a zoomed up view. We can see that rotating through the sky. That's going to play. Here we go. And this is the same thing that we see with the moon. It's simply because of the Earth is rotating underneath the sky, and our perceived angle of the object, it appears to be rotating through the sky. And this is simply field rotation, nothing more. It's not because the moon has flipped on its axis or the Earth has flipped on its axis. It's simply the Earth turning underneath the sky that we're looking at.
Well, also, if the Earth axis changes were that dramatic, I think we would notice something outside. I mean, we would be in serious, dire straits, don't you think?
We certainly would, yes.
Well, I think there's our proof right there that the oceans aren't, sloshing over the cities and all that. Every 12 hours, I think is what you said, right?
Yeah. There's another video that I did much earlier. This is before CatFishGlass came onto the scene, where I used some video of a Concorde aircraft and some other aircraft doing a flyby across the sky. Now, they were flying in a straight line, and it was a very good example of how we see field rotation. I'll just play this bit of the video and we'll have a quick talk about that. Let's have a look at this video of this Concorde aircraft flying across the sky from east to west as if we are looking north. This is the sort of view that we would have from the southern hemisphere if we were comparing it to the moon. Let's take another look, and we'll take some photos this time as the aircraft fly over. Pointing northeast, pointing north, and pointing northwest. Now let's take a look at our photos. We can see now that the angle that the aircraft are pointing in our photographs are quite different in each photo. And in exactly the same way, we will see that the moon appears to change its angle as it travels across the sky. Okay, so there's an example with the aircraft. Now CatFishGlass seems to have a problem because he's saying that you can't use an aircraft as an example of field rotation because he calls it linear motion and seems to think that that makes it different somehow to the moon crossing the sky. Or whether it's an object such as an aircraft crossing the sky or an object such as the moon apparently crossing the sky due to the Earth's rotation underneath it, the same applies. It's going to appear to rotate through the sky as we turn and follow it and take pictures of it. It's exactly the same thing. So you can follow that, can't you, Logan?
Absolutely.
So
the airplane thing really brings it out. You know, I mean, because that happens within seconds of what it takes all night for the moon to do.
That's right.
You know, and it shows you right there. If nothing else changes, that, you know, at least that angle is going to change. But the question to me was, like, you know, I want to, you know, make it really clear here that this is what his point is that if we see that tilt from the extreme early evening to the extreme early morning, his interpretation of that is that either us or the moon was way out of whack on its axis, and that we were all in very deep trouble of this. And before springtime was to roll around, you know, we'd all be pushing up daisies. That's right. He's predicting that millions of people are going to die, and Dazzathecameraman is a murderer because I'm trying to cover this up. Well, because you're questioning him about it. Yeah. You're a murderer. Yeah. I mean, he said that a bunch. I think like 6-7 times in there, I think. Yeah. So, it's good that we've absolutely got to tear the top off of these and get down to the bottom of it. You know, especially a fanatical like this, you know. But I do want to do one with you about the fireball uptick thing. I've got some new angles that I wanted to discuss with you about that, and especially that graph. Sure. Yep, okay, well, let's do that. Let's wrap this one up now so we don't make it too long, and we can look at doing the fireball one as a follow-up. How's that? Well, always a pleasure, Dazza, and shout out to all the dirtbags, and we'll see you on the next one. Okay, and as always, do check out my Facebook discussion page, Voices of Reason to Explain X, or VORTEX. You'll find a link in the description area. Thank you for watching. (2014). Hello YouTube, this is Dazza the Cameraman. Today is Tuesday the 2nd of January 2014, and I'm here with the original dirtbag Logan Runnin, and we're having a conversation about CatFishGlass and his claims that there's something strange going on with the moon. Here is a video that Logan Runnin has just uploaded called This Is It Folks, CatFishGlass Explains How We're All Gonna Die. And we're looking at a diagram that CatFishGlass has posted, and we're going to discuss this diagram and see what's going on in this diagram and see if we can't try and make sense of what CatFishGlass is trying to explain and his understanding of field rotation and what is going on with the moon. So let's go to the diagram that CatFishGlass has posted. This is a better view of it. Now, in this diagram we see CFG Nimrod represents CatFishGlass standing on the Earth. That's why it says CFG, CatFishGlass. Nimrod standing on the Earth looking at the moon, and as he's standing here looking at the moon and the sun is shining on the moon, it's at first quarter, which means it looks like half a moon. This is what we see out on the right hand side. This is what CatFishGlass would see. But as the Earth rotates
on its axis and the moon crosses the sky, when CatFishGlass gets down to this point as the Earth is rotated 90 degrees, then this is what he sees. Now, it seems a little bit confusing because we actually have to tilt our head to sort of understand what CatFishGlass is seeing in this box. But if you look at his view here, you see that he's actually looking this way now. Okay, if you imagine that his feet are on the ground this way, and he's looking at the moon this way, then if we stood him up upright and looked at what he is seeing, then this is what he would see. The moon would look like this, whereas before it looked like this. Now there's only one problem with this diagram, and it's a simple mistake, and that is